Her name was Jasmine. Not loud, not flashy, not someone you'd notice first when walking into a room. But ask anyone who'd been with the company longer than a quarterly report, and they'd tell you Jasmine was the reason the lights still stayed on in Europe. 20 years, 2 full decades in compliance. She'd survived 4 CEOs, 3 rebrands, 1 hostile takeover, and countless 3 a.m. calls from German customs officers who didn't like how a barcode sticker was placed. Jasmine wasn't the kind of person who made noise. She made systems work. Berlin wasn't a getaway for her. It wasn't a vacation. It was war in a blazer. It was sitting across the table from grim-faced regulators with pens like scalpels. Men and women who could kill millions in contracts with a single misplaced signature. And Jasmine knew them, by name, by tone, by preference of paperclip placement. Because for 20 years, she kept those relationships alive, built on trust, precision, and the kind of professionalism that didn't trend on social media, but could save a company from disaster. She didn't ask for credit. She didn't expect applause. But what she did expect was respect for the job, and that respect was about to be thrown out by a man in loafers and a slide deck. His name was Blake. Fresh suit, fresh smile, freshly minted MBA, still steaming like it just came out of the printer. He walked into the company like a man on a mission, except the mission wasn't to learn, it was to prove something. And the first thing he decided to prove? That Jasmine's annual Berlin licensing trip, the same trip that kept the entire European operation legally functional, was a luxury vacation that no longer aligned with our core business strategy. Those were his exact words. Said it right there on the presentation slide in bold. No more expensive foreign vacations on my watch. The room fell silent. A dozen heads turned toward Jasmine at the far end of the table, but she didn't move. Blake smiled like he'd just dropped the mic. And maybe in his head he did. He called it streamlining. He called it modernizing legacy workflows. What it really was a loaded gun aimed at the temple of everything Jasmine had built for 2 decades. But Jasmine, she didn't flinch. She just said one word. Okay. And inside that single word, so simple, so calm, was a storm waiting to unfold. Jasmine didn't argue, she didn't ask for clarity, she didn't raise her hand or shake her head, she simply opened her laptop and got to work. Within the hour, she forwarded every licensing document to Taylor, the 24-year-old assistant, who thought retroactive compliance was maybe a skincare brand. Jasmine CC'd Blake, of course. Professional to the end. The email was surgical. Bullet points, historical filings, key regulator contacts, deadline reminders highlighted in red, a polite closing line, please confirm receipt and track submission accordingly. She even added a smiley face. And then she hit send. That was it. That was Jasmine's last official move, the final transfer of power. The moment she was quietly erased from the system she built. Not with a demotion letter, not with a confrontation. Just with silence. But here's the thing about silence. Sometimes it's louder than shouting. Jasmine closed her email tab and opened a new folder of her desktop, and with steady fingers, she named it When It Explodes. Jasmine didn't expect a thank you, but she did expect a reply. The licensing documents she sent, unread. The confirmation request, ignored. Not even a got it thanks. Not even a thumbs up emoji. Instead, Taylor, the woman now responsible for keeping Europe legally operational, was busy posting smoothies from Costa Rica. Jasmine watched it all unfold quietly. She didn't like, she didn't comment, just observed. A strawberry pineapple blend, a hammock selfie with the caption, work-life balance, #blessed, #no screens. No screens. That was the woman now in charge of meeting German regulatory deadlines. Jasmine kept a screenshot, just in case. She began checking the deadline daily. Then twice a day. Still no response. No calendar invites, no follow-up, no movement. Just silence. And the tick, tick, tick of a clock only she seemed to hear. Blake didn't come at her directly. He didn't need to. Instead, he weaponized meetings. Some people, he'd say casually, are just too process-heavy. Or, legacy employees sometimes have a hard time adapting to a faster, leaner model. The room would go quiet. Heads would turn. Some smiled awkwardly. Others looked down. And Jasmine, she just kept her pen moving. But now, her notes weren't for compliance reports. They were evidence. Every comment, every phrase, every petty jab wrapped in a buzzword sandwich. She logged it all, because Blake thought she was silent. What he didn't realize was that Jasmine was building a case, not in court, in the shadows, with timestamps, with receipts, with patience. And Blake, he kept talking, digging his own grave one smug quote at a time. Jasmine had a rule. Document everything. Trust no one. Every email from Blake saved. Every Slack thread with Taylor's thumbs up replies to policy questions screenshotted. She pulled reports, downloaded calendars, archived old workflows. She even retrieved her personal compliance tracker, a color-coded masterpiece that had outlived 3 platforms and 2 systems. And she backed it all up. Not on the cloud, not on a shared drive, but onto a USB drive. Small, silent, and taped beneath her desk like a black box on a crashing plane. This wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Jasmine had seen enough to know people didn't ask for help until it was already burning. And when that happened, she wasn't going to argue or say, "I told you so." She was going to pull out the receipts. Jasmine sat at her desk staring at her wall calendar. A single date circled 3 times in red ink. June 17. No alarms. No reminders. No nudges from Germany. Just one chance. One deadline. And it was getting closer. June 17th. It wasn't marked in anyone's inbox. It didn't come with alarms. No urgent red flags. No last chance reminders. In Germany, they don't remind you. They assume you're competent. Jasmine knew this, but she said nothing. That morning, Taylor's Slack status was still a palm tree emoji. Oh, until Monday. #Yoga Ranch. No laptop, no emails, no clue. The renewal portal quietly closed at 3 a.m. Berlin time. That's it. No fireworks, no alerts, just a quiet click, the sound of a door locking. While no one noticed, they were still inside. Jasmine sat at her desk staring at her screen. A tiny red dot appeared on the portal page. Status: license expired. She took a screenshot, saved it to the folder labeled When It Explodes, June 20th. The first ping came in at 7:43 a.m. #IntOps alert. Anyone else locked out of the Berlin license portal? Says our credentials are invalid. Then another, can't upload customs docs. System just kicked me out mid-submission. Slack lit up like a Christmas tree. And Blake finally responded 16 minutes later. Probably a server glitch. Try clearing your cache. Chrome can be weird sometimes. No urgency. No concern. Jasmine didn't type a word. She sat quietly, watching, listening. Because this was the sound of impact. The quiet crack before the dam breaks. She clicked open her screenshot folder. June 17th. Status: license expired 3 days ago. And now, the cracks were finally reaching the surface. Jasmine didn't raise her hand, didn't offer a solution, didn't walk into anyone's office. She stirred her tea, calm, measured. And while Blake scrambled to clear cache and blame IT, Jasmine watched the room like a firefighter who'd already seen the flames and chose not to shout. This wasn't negligence, it was precision. For weeks, she had warned them in silence. She had handed them every document. She had walked away when they stripped her access. They didn't want her expertise. Now, they could live without it. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, took a slow sip, and then her inbox chimed. Subject: license deactivation notice. Immediate action required. She opened it. Failure to renew EU license by June 17 has resulted in deactivation. Effective immediately. Daily penalties 100,000. Jasmine didn't blink. She saved the email, filed it under "When It Explodes." By Friday morning, the fallout had begun. Berlin was the first to go dark, then Hamburg, then Warsaw. Entire systems froze. The CRM dashboard lit up red, access denied, client login expired. License validation failed. Sales teams couldn't process orders. Customs flagged shipments. A refrigerated container sat idle in Hamburg, melting margins by the hour. Support lines rang out unanswered. Chatbots looped into dead ends. From the outside, it looked like a cyber attack. But it wasn't malware. It was paperwork. One deadline. One overlooked responsibility. And now the whole machine was choking on its own arrogance. Jasmine watched it unfold, like watching dominoes fall in perfect rhythm. And still, no one asked her a thing. She was there, at her desk, right where she'd always been, but it was like Jasmine had vanished. People walked past her in a blur of panic. No one met her eyes, no one said her name. She had become a ghost, watching the chaos she once prevented, now happening in real time. Blake paced near the printers, muttering about technical escalations and vendor-side issues. One analyst whispered, "Weren't we supposed to renew something this month?" Another replied, "I think legal had it, or maybe Taylor." No one looked in Jasmine's direction, but she heard it all, and she wrote it all down. Because the shipments, they were real, containers full of perishable goods, now detained. The refrigerated systems at the Hamburg port set to auto shutoff after 72 hours. That was 3 days ago, and the food inside was now rotting in silence. Just like the trust that had been rotting from the inside of the company for months. Every hour came with a cost, $12,500 per hour, $300,000 in just over a day, and that was just the fine. It didn't include client penalties, it didn't include spoiled goods, it didn't include broken trust. Teams across Europe were scrambling, legal, logistics, customer service, all chasing ghosts, trying to figure out what had failed. Is this IT? Is this an integration bug? Did someone delete a key account? Blake deflected with confidence. "We're escalating. We've got vendor calls. Should be resolved by EOD." But the real answer was buried in an email sent 3 weeks ago, an email Jasmine had forwarded, one that no one had ever replied to. And now, it was too late. At 6:13 a.m., the CEO received a letter, delivered by courier, official seal, German efficiency, no smile. This letter serves as formal notice of license expiration, effective since June 17th. You are now operating without legal authorization in the EU. The CEO held the paper like it might burst into flames. The boardroom was dead silent. No phones, no side conversations, just the sound of leather chairs creaking under tension. The CEO stood at the head of the table, pale, paper in hand. He cleared his throat. As of this morning, we have lost over 1 million euros because of a license. The word license hung in the air like a curse. Nobody breathed. His eyes swept the table one by one, cold, calculated, searching for guilt, for cracks, for someone to name. Blake shifted in his seat, tugged at his collar. Someone scribbled notes just to avoid eye contact. The general counsel looked like she might vomit. Jasmine, calm, still, silent, because she knew exactly what was coming, and she was ready. Blake's voice trembled. His eyes darted to the CEO, then to Jasmine, then back to the table. I delegated it to Taylor. A pause. We were restructuring. His hands were sweating. I assumed it had been handled. A thick silence followed. The COO raised an eyebrow. The CFO folded her arms. Everyone knew what was really happening. Blake was sinking, fast. The COO didn't even blink. You assumed. Blake tried to smile. It came out as a twitch. There were a lot of moving parts. The sentence died halfway through. Jasmine, still silent, but her fingers hovered over her laptop. She was about to speak, not with words, with proof. Jasmine didn't say a word. She simply opened her laptop and pushed it gently but firmly into the center of the table. On the screen, a timeline, timestamps, email headers, attachments, one folder, when it explodes. The room leaned in. June 2nd, delegation email from Blake. June 4th, licensing checklist sent to Taylor. June 11th, reminder with deadline. June 17th, no response from Taylor. June 20th, government notification, license expired. Each file, each note, signed, time-stamped, archived. "This is all of it," the CFO whispered. Jasmine nodded. The CEO didn't blink, didn't even look at Blake. "Leave your badge with reception. Effective immediately." A pause. Blake opened his mouth to protest. But even he knew there was nothing left to say. The boardroom was silent, except for the echo of Blake's footsteps fading down the hall. Jasmine began closing her laptop. The storm was over. Or so she thought. Then came the voice. "Jasmine, one moment." The CEO stood, calm, hands folded, but eyes rushed. "We need to make this right." A folder slid across the table toward her. New contract, 30% raise, head of regulatory affairs, Europe, executive board seat. Everyone was watching. Jasmine glanced down but didn't open the folder. Instead, she smiled. "I appreciate it." A beat of silence. "But I already made my flight." And with that, she stood up, picked up her bag, and walked out, not as an employee, but as the only person who had ever held the system together. Just as Jasmine reached the door, she paused, turned, then reached into her bag and placed a crisp white envelope on the table. The room froze. She spoke softly, without anger. "My resignation, signed and notarized last month." The CEO blanked. "You planned this?" She smiled. "No, I prepared for this." And just like that, the woman they once dismissed walked away with more dignity than the entire board combined. The CEO exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry this happened." Jasmine didn't blink. Her voice was low, precise. "I'm sorry that it had to cost you something before you saw it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was devastating. She turned, walked to the door, and disappeared into the hallway like a ghost who'd never been there at all. No farewell email, no flowers in a jar, no awkward group photo in front of the office banner with the words, "We'll miss you, Jasmine." She didn't wait for a crowd to wave her goodbye. She didn't want confetti, or cupcakes, or a forced applause from the same people who once looked right through her. She didn't owe them closure. Jasmine packed her things 2 nights before the meeting, quietly. One box, labeled only with a sticky note that said, "Do not open unless you know what you're looking for." She turned in her ID badge the morning before her resignation became public, her desktop wiped, her documents migrated and archived. Even her chair had been pushed in perfectly aligned. By the time the others realized something was off, she was already halfway out the city. No footsteps echoed behind her. No calls shouted down the hallway. Just the soft tap of her heels, one step at a time. Past the coffee machine that once brewed bitter meetings, past the framed company values she lived, but the company didn't. And when she reached the elevator, she paused. Not to look back, but to close her eyes and let the silence soak into her skin. A silence she had earned. And when the doors slid shut, the building never even noticed that its strongest pillar had just walked away. The seat reclined like a promise wide leather first class. A cool glass of champagne rested gently between her fingers, catching the golden light of a Berlin-bound morning. Jasmine didn't look back. Not at the city skyline shrinking beneath the clouds, not at the company she had served for nearly 2 decades. Not at the silence that followed her resignation, loud enough to echo through boardrooms. This time, the flight to Berlin was for her. No paperwork, no binders, no whispers of approval waiting at customs. Just Jasmine, a woman finally untethered from obligation. She tilted the champagne glass slowly, watching the bubbles rise. Not in celebration, but in confirmation. This was justice, delivered cold, served in crystal. Her phone vibrated once. A message from an ex-colleague. "Everyone's asking how you stayed so calm." Jasmine typed back 3 words. Simple, surgical. Because I knew. She put the phone away, reclined further, closed her eyes, and let the silence finish what her words never needed to start. Somewhere between clouds and closure, Jasmine opened her notebook. Not to write a plan, not to draft a strategy, but to write a truth. A truth the board never understood. A truth Blake tried to ignore. A truth the system only recognized once it cracked. She wrote, "What they tried to cut out was the only thing keeping the whole system alive. No revenge, no bitterness, just the realization that experience is invisible until it's gone." Jasmine didn't need to fight. She just needed to wait, and let the weight of her absence speak louder than any protest ever could. She smiled, then tore the page out, folded it once, and left it inside the seat back pocket. Maybe someone would read it. Maybe they wouldn't, but the lesson was already written in losses, fines, and panic. And Jasmine Shi was already landing. In life and in work, silence doesn't mean weakness. The strongest people don't shout. They prepare, they endure, and then they let truth do the talking. Jasmine's story reminds us, experience is invisible until it's gone. You don't always need revenge. Sometimes the best answer is patience, preparation, and letting the system collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. Don't be afraid when others underestimate you. Be afraid only when you underestimate yourself. Have you ever been underestimated? Stayed silent to protect your dignity? Believed that truth would one day speak louder than voices? Then Through Her Eyes is for you. Hit subscribe and join a space where real stories uplift, empower, and remind you you are not alone. Through her eyes, you'll finally see your own strength.